Do you know the very moment that makes a narcissist tremble deep within their soul? It's not when you cry. It's not when you get angry. It's not even when you walk away in silence. It's the moment you finally understand their language. You no longer listen to their words. You read the intention hidden behind every pause, every sweet promise, every cold punishment. And from that moment on, the game shifts. They know they've lost control. The tricks that once manipulated you now become meaningless, while you not only free, become the mirror that exposes the very truth they've always feared to face. In today's video, we'll uncover what truly happens when the narcissist realizes the empath has learned their silent language. This isn't just a battle of awareness, it's a turning point that allows you to be reborn and return to your true self. So, make sure to hit subscribe and stay until the end of the video, because what you're about to hear won't just expose the narcissist's manipulative strategies, it will also give you the key to reclaim your power and the inner peace that was once stolen. Have you ever realized that the narcissist's games were never truly communication? Every conversation, every gesture, every silence carefully calculated to control your emotions. When they're gentle, it's not love, it's strategy. When they go silent, it's not hurt, it's punishment meant to pull you back. When they rage, it's not an outburst, it's a weapon to make you afraid. And then, when you see through it all, a profound shift takes place. You no longer react according to their old script. You don't soften when they cry. You don't feel unsettled when they go silent. You don't lose sleep when they rage. You begin to see clearly. Their actions say nothing about your worth. They only reflect the insecurity inside them. This is the moment the narcissist panics, because their tools no longer work on you. They may try to escalate longer silences, fiercer anger, or sweeter words. But it's all useless, because you've awakened. You've learned their language, and once understood, it cannot be ununderstood. And do you know what's most miraculous? You start looking back at yourself. You ask, why was I once so easily controlled? The answer is not to blame yourself, but to heal. You recognize old wounds, fears of abandonment, cravings for validation that once made you fertile ground for manipulation. But now, instead of chains, these wounds become stepping stones for growth. This journey doesn't turn you into someone vengeful, nor does it make you cold. It makes you someone who knows how to love rightly, beginning with yourself. You learn to set boundaries without guilt. You learn to love without losing yourself. And you learn silence not out of helplessness but out of peace. That is true freedom. When you no longer need the narcissist to validate your worth. When you no longer fear abandonment. When you stand firm, whole, and unshakable, untouched by their old tricks. In that moment, you become a mirror reflecting the rawest truth to the narcissist. They no longer have power, and nothing terrifies them more. Just imagine, all this time they believed a glance, a message, a prolonged silence was enough to pull you back into their cycle. They thought you'd always be trapped in their carefully woven emotional snares. But one day, they realize none of it works anymore. You no longer chase to explain. You no longer try to soothe their baseless rage. You no longer stay up at night asking what you did wrong. You are silent not from fear, but because you've learned not to let them occupy your inner world. That's when the narcissist spirals, for they have never known how to exist without controlling another's emotions. You become the mirror, exposing that their so-called power was nothing but illusion, and that truth cuts deeper than any criticism ever could. Remember, narcissists never live by truth, they live by reaction. They measure their worth by your suffering, your tears, your pleas, your efforts to fix things. And when you stop reacting, it's as if an addict has lost their last dose. They tremble, they resist, and they'll try everything to drag you back. First, they escalate. Fiercer rage, harsher accusations, longer silences trying to prove they still affect you. But instead of being shaken, you observe calmly. You see clearly. This is not genuine emotion but strategy, and when you don't react, their whole plan collapses. Next, they may play the victim. They complain, cry, recount losses, hardships, and pains that seem real, but you are awake enough to see this is not repentance, only another tactic. They don't seek healing, they seek control by preying on your compassion. And then comes the final sweetness. They say the words you once longed to hear. I miss you. You're the only one who understands me. No one matters but you. But this time, your heart doesn't melt. Because you've learned, unless those words are matched with genuine actions and real change, they are nothing more than new traps dressed in beautiful clothes. The moment you realize this, you no longer feel small, you feel powerful. You see clearly that your worth does not live in someone else's eyes, it lives in your own awakened soul. And then, a profound shift occurs. You begin the journey of returning to yourself. You realize why you were once so easily controlled. Because deep down there were wounds left unhealed, fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, fear of being unloved. But now you no longer run from them. You face them, embrace them, and heal each broken fragment of your heart. You learn to set boundaries, not to build walls, but to protect your peace. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to be silent, not to endure, but to save your energy for what is truly worthy. This is the greatest difference. You no longer want to defeat them. You no longer seek to teach them a lesson. You simply reclaim the power you once unconsciously gave away. And that is the greatest victory, a quiet victory, but one strong enough to leave them stunned. How does the narcissist react? They may explode, disappear, or find another victim to fill the void. But that is no longer your story. Once you have seen the truth, you cannot go back. You've traveled too far to be pulled in again. The miracle is this. Once you step out of the storm, life begins to grow quiet. No more dramatic arguments, no more endless nights of tears, no more emotions swinging like a roller coaster. At first, that stillness may feel strange, even empty, because you were used to the chaos. But then you realize it isn't emptiness, it's peace. And that peace becomes the foundation on which you rebuild your life. You start to rediscover yourself, the forgotten dreams, the buried passions, the values once dismissed. You discover that true love never demands self-betrayal. You understand that kindness does not mean allowing others to exploit you. And you realize that the strongest compassion is compassion for yourself. When you rise with this clarity, you become what the narcissist fears most. A free human being. No longer needing them to define your worth. No longer needing external approval. No longer needing to earn love. You only need to be yourself. And that is the end of the game. Not through a dramatic showdown, but through a simple truth. You have grown beyond the pain, stronger than their games and wiser than their masks. There is a truth few realize. When you begin to understand the language hidden behind the narcissist's behavior, everything suddenly becomes so clear that you wonder how blind you once were. The things that used to confuse you, that made you blame yourself, that convinced you it was your fault, you now see were nothing but tools they used to keep you under control. For example, when they told you that you were too sensitive, it was never true. It was a way to make you doubt your own feelings. When they went silent, it wasn't because they were hurt, it was because they wanted to punish you. When they suddenly turned sweet, it wasn't love, it was bait to pull you back into the cycle. Once you see this code, you can never be trapped in it again. And in that moment, you begin reclaiming freedom piece by piece. You no longer hear their words as commands. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth by pleasing them. Instead, you begin asking yourself, why did I allow myself to be controlled for so long? That question isn't for self-blame, but for understanding and healing. You realize it was your old wounds, the fear of abandonment, the pain of being unrecognized, the hunger for unconditional love that once made you easy prey for manipulation. But now, instead of avoiding them, you face them. You look directly at the shadows in your soul and say, I will not let these wounds decide my future anymore. And then a quiet transformation begins. You learn to sit alone without feeling empty. You learn to be silent without feeling lonely. You learn to smile at their jabs, because you know they're nothing but desperate attempts to pull you back. You learn to listen to yourself, something you forgot for years while listening to everyone else. Interestingly, as you change, their reactions grow more extreme, because they haven't just lost control of you, they're confronted with the truth that their power never truly existed. It only existed because you allowed it. And when you withdraw that permission, they feel empty, powerless, and afraid. They may try everything: blame you for changing, accuse you of being cold, even smear your name so others see you in a bad light. But deep down, they know the issue isn't you. The issue is that they've lost the source of power they once depended on. And you, instead of reacting, instead of running to explain, simply smile. Because you now understand. You don't need to prove you're right. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. That worth is in how firmly you stand, in the peace you protect, and in the light you shine, once no longer shadowed by manipulation. There is a dangerous temptation at this stage. Once you understand their game, you may feel like playing it back on them. You may think, if they manipulated me, why not manipulate them so they feel the same pain? But be careful, this is the final trap. Because if you become their mirror, you fall back into the very cycle you worked so hard to escape. True victory is not in beating them at their own game, but in no longer needing to play that game at all. True strength is when you can look them straight in the eye, see through every trick, and still keep peace within your heart. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to speak loudly. Your steady presence itself becomes the most powerful answer. And then, one day, you realize you no longer care what they think, what they do, or what they say about you. You're no longer haunted by questions like, will they come back? Or will they change? Instead, you care about one thing. Am I living true to myself today? In that moment, you've stepped out of their control and into your true growth. The greater miracle is this. Once you learn their language, you're no longer just immune to manipulation from one person. You begin to recognize the same patterns anywhere in work, in friendships, even in family. And instead of falling into the trap again, you choose to set boundaries from the start. You no longer see yourself as a victim. You see yourself as someone who has learned the lesson. Every silence of theirs teaches you to value peace. Every burst of anger teaches you to stand firm. Every false sweetness teaches you to tell the difference between real and fake. And all of these, in the end, become gifts that help you mature. You come to understand. Victory doesn't mean they lose to you, but you no longer play their game. And that is the kind of freedom no one can take away. There's one truth you'll soon realize. When you step out of the narcissist's game, not only do they change, but you change as well. You look back at yourself and see that the truth was never, you weren't good enough. The truth was, you gave too much power to someone unworthy of it. In the past, you may have thought, if I'm more patient, they'll change. If I love more, they'll see it. But now you see clearly. No love can heal someone who doesn't want to heal. They never sought growth, only power. And you, in your awakening, stepped out of the game. When the narcissist loses power, they fall into crisis. They no longer know who they are if you're not reacting to confirm their existence. They may find someone else to fill the void. They may create false stories to paint themselves as the victim. They may even come back begging for another chance. But you know, it's all nothing more than desperate attempts to restore their illusion of control. While they panic, you begin rebuilding yourself. You learn to set boundaries, to say no without guilt. You begin to prioritize what nourishes your soul: a peaceful night's sleep, a forgotten passion, a healthy relationship where you don't have to prove your worth. And then you discover a profound truth. You no longer need them to feel loved. True love is not tug of war, not an emotional addiction, not the highs and crashes of chaos. True love brings peace, and that peace you've begun to find within yourself. This enrages the narcissist, because they never wanted you to know there was another life, a life without them. They will try everything to prove you wrong. that you'll be lonely, that you'll regret it, that no one else will ever understand you. But this time those words echo faintly in the distance, powerless against the calm you've built. You begin to recognize a new language, the language of freedom. It's not built on fear or control. It doesn't need drama or fiery arguments to feel real. This new language speaks through respect, sincerity, and consistent action. And you understand. If a relationship cannot speak this language, it's not worth trading your peace for. Remember, what the narcissist fears most is not losing you, but losing power over you. When they can no longer make you cry, doubt yourself, or fear abandonment, they feel as if they are slowly dying. Because everything they ever knew of love was never love at all, but control in disguise. And when you see through it, they lose the mask that shielded them all these years. Yet you don't stop at merely being immune to them. You go further. You learn to heal yourself. You realize that the attraction you once felt toward them came from the empty spaces in your soul, spaces longing to be filled. When you learn to fill those spaces with self-love, their presence loses its pull. You'll go through a strange stage, when the initial stillness may feel empty, because you were once used to storms, to waves of emotional highs and lows. But then you see, it isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to be reborn, to rewrite your story. And in that process, you learn something vital. No one can take your worth unless you hand it over. When you hold your own power, you become untouchable to manipulation. They may try, they may test again, but you are no longer easily swayed. They may try with anger, you stay calm. They may try with silence, you enjoy the peace. They may try with sweetness, you see through the disguise. And in each calm response, you prove one thing: you've grown. This growth doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. You can still love, still empathize, but you no longer allow love to become chains. You can still be soft, but your softness now comes from strength, not weakness. And that is what makes you different. You don't need revenge. Your very existence in freedom is proof enough that they no longer hold power. You don't need to prove you've won, you only need to live true to yourself. And in that moment, the narcissist realizes the battle is over. When you've learned the narcissist language, the journey doesn't end at simply seeing through them. That's only the beginning. What matters more is how you use that awareness to reshape yourself and build a future unbound. Remember, when you were still caught in the cycle, you were always reacting, crying when they were cold, explaining when they blamed, softening when they grew sweet. You moved to the rhythm they orchestrated. But when you awaken, you begin to step out of that dance. And in your calm silence, something miraculous happens. They lose their rhythm. The narcissist cannot survive your stillness. Peace makes them feel invisible. They grow restless, panicked, because their whole life has been defined by creating imbalance in others. And when you remain unmoved, you become living proof that their power was only an illusion. This is often when they escalate. They may resort to harsher tactics, spreading lies about you, convincing others you are to blame, or even reappearing as a changed person kind, repentant, transformed. But you now have different eyes. Eyes no longer clouded by emotion, but sharpened by awareness. You know, true change is never just promises or momentary gestures. Real change requires time, consistency, and accountability, things they rarely embody. When you stand firm through these tricks, you begin to feel a new kind of strength, the strength of choice. You are no longer carried by the waves of emotions others create. You become the one steering your own ship, and in that moment, you move from victim to master of your life. Yet this journey carries a subtle challenge: loneliness. After years of chaos, the initial calm can feel empty. You may miss the drama, the sense of being needed, the illusionary highs. Many empaths return because they mistake peace for lack. This is the moment you must be most vigilant. Remind yourself that the drama was never love. It was emotional addiction, and like any addiction, it gave short bursts of pleasure but left long-term scars. Once you overcome that addiction, you discover a new kind of love, one that offers safety, respect, and freedom. You begin to notice the differences. In a healthy relationship, silence is for listening, not punishment. Sweetness comes from a true heart, not a tactic to keep you hooked. Anger, if it arises, is expressed with responsibility, not to control or intimidate. And when you experience this, you clearly see that what you once endured was never worthy of the love you sought. The astonishing part is this: when you step out of manipulation, you don't just free yourself, you inspire others. Friends, colleagues, even strangers will sense the new energy within you, an energy no longer strangled by fear, but flowing from peace and freedom. You become a living mirror of a truth, that the one who was once weak, once manipulated, can rise strong and define their own worth. And that is what the narcissist never wants to see. Look back. Every tear you shed, every sleepless night, every moment you asked, "Was it my fault?" All of it has now become your lesson. You don't need to deny the past, for it is the foundation of who you are today, someone who knows how to love, but also how to protect themselves. You learn to forgive, but not to repeat. You learn to empathize, but not to lose yourself. You learn to open your heart, but only to those who are worthy. This is not a small change, it is a rebirth. And then you realize the deepest truth. The narcissist was never your destroyer. They were a mirror reflecting the shadows within you that you had not yet faced. Through them, you learned to see your wounds and to heal yourself. Through them, you learned the hardest lesson, that love cannot exist without respect and freedom. When you grasp this, you no longer feel hatred. You no longer crave revenge. You feel gratitude not for the harm, but for the lessons. And that is true liberation. Because the greatest victory is not in making them lose. It is in no longer needing to play their game. And in the end, the most important truth comes to light. You were never truly defeated in a relationship with a narcissist. Because even if they took your tears, your time, or your peace, those very things became the material of your awakening. They thought they had destroyed you, but in reality they only became the unintentional teacher of the greatest lesson of your life, the lesson of inner strength, self-worth, and true freedom. When you realize that love never requires control, you step into a new chapter of life, a chapter no longer centered on pleasing others, no longer a battlefield for recognition. This new chapter is about you, about living fully in your worth, in your peace, in your self-love. Yes, you stumbled, but each fall made you rise with clearer eyes, a stronger heart, and a more open soul. You now understand that forgiveness does not mean repetition. Love does not mean making yourself small. And silence is no longer a sign of helplessness. It is a declaration of strength. Picture this. One day the narcissist looks at you and sees a completely different person. No more begging eyes, no more desperate tears, no more heart easily controlled. They see someone steady, clear, and no longer part of their game. And that is the moment they fear most. Not because they've lost you, but because they've lost the ability to define you. From this moment on, you don't need revenge. Your existence in freedom is the strongest proof. You don't need to prove yourself right. Your peace speaks louder than any defense. And you don't need anyone else to define your worth, because that worth radiates from your awakened self. This journey is not just a personal story. It is proof that anyone who has been hurt, anyone who has been manipulated, can still rise, heal, and walk forward in strength. And if you are hearing these words today, believe that this too can become your story. If this message touched your heart, make sure to subscribe, because there are many more insights waiting to guide you on your path of healing and growth. Leave a comment. I have awakened, to mark the moment you chose yourself over fear. And don't forget to share this video, because somewhere out there, someone may be waiting for the light you have just found. Because in the end, this journey is not about what they did to you. It is about what you chose to do with yourself after it all. And today, you have chosen freedom.